What happens when I'm offended? What happens when what I'm reading or seeing in culture offends me? It upsets me. It seems out of kilter with my sense of morality, my sense of ethics, my sense of how the world is supposed to work. What happens if I feel slighted or dehumanized in some way? What if the moral logic of the art conflicts with my own? Well, here I feel almost obligated to invoke the presence of the great one again, Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks and the producers. When he first wrote a movie called The Producers. It was the late 60s. The movie came out, I believe, in 68. He had, for some time, been going through life where people were asking him. He had had a lot of success on TV. He had had some success in comedy albums. He had had some success on stage in Broadway. And people were asking, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? And his response to this was always, I'm going to do a show called Springtime for Hitler. And that was his way of saying, shut up, get away from me. Because it's such an offensive idea. The idea of making a play, a musical, a gay and lavish Broadway musical about Hitler and the Nazis was preposterous. Now, he was making this argument in the late 60s, 20 years after World War II. So, you know, things were a little raw. Things were a little edgy. People were, you know, not ready for that. That's really offensive. But he came out with it anyway. And the centerpiece of it was this lavish musical, Springtime for Hitler. Now, 30 years after that, he came out with The Producers on Broadway, where he turned the entire story from that movie, which is an hysterical movie, and I advise everyone to go watch it. It became a Broadway musical and a smash hit, phenomenal hit. Everybody loved it, but it still had that core element on it of making fun of Hitler, or at least celebrating Hitler in a way that was conspicuous. And the whole gimmick of that scene is the intercutting between this lavish musical production celebrating the Third Reich and the Nazi conquest, and the horror-stricken faces of the audience members. It was offensive. But think of the effect. Yes, it was outlandish in a kind of funny way, and a lot of people are going to laugh at that kind of stuff, and all right, fine. But the effect of the humor was to satirize, was to take the sting, perhaps, out of the original offense, or to make you think about it, to objectify it, to force you to recognize that, yeah, okay, that's stupid behavior. That is offensive behavior. I recognize that as offensive behavior, and because I recognize that as offensive behavior, I won't fall for it. I won't let myself get sucked up into that. So the art forces you to distance yourself a little. Now, the joke worked better in the Broadway play than it did in the original movie, because the distance was there in time already. 30 years later, people weren't just remembering like, well, yeah, we fought them just, a couple of years ago. 30 years from that, a little more distance. You can be funny about something. You can be objective about something. But that essential mechanism is there. That essential mechanism of using humor of a sort, not just to crack jokes, which might be offensive, but to get you to think about something, to get you to push back from it just a little and take another look at something and go, what? That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that people fell for Nazism, that people celebrated Adolf Hitler in Germany, but they did. It's ridiculous that the god of reason got an itch and tried to rape a river nymph and then was so still taken away by her, even after she'd been changed into a tree, that he started grinding against the tree. It's ridiculous. But in denying that urge, in denying that aspect of humanity to fall for stuff like this, to get swept up in the enthusiasm of totalitarian military rule or the enthusiasm of lust, to deny that we are subject to that is to set ourselves up for a real big fall. The humor forces us to recognize that we are all susceptible to these things. The humor forces us to confront the ridiculous in ourselves. And by doing so, we're better able to withstand those moments of being overwhelmed. We become the reed that bends instead of breaks. But it also enriches our understanding of who we are. For Ovid, you can't deny human fallibility. But by thinking about it in different ways, in trying to objectify it, you can confront it and admit it and control it just a little bit. We're always going to get swept away by our own enthusiasms. We're always going to, do stupid things. Sexually or not. There are many different brands of enthusiasm. He's just playing on the one that is probably the most commercially viable. Sex sells. But you have to grant that there might be a higher purpose than just offending. You have to grant that, well, okay, let's just see, is there something else here? Is there something a little more subtle? Is there something a little bit more calculated going on here? Is there some effect to this joke? Even if it's a bad joke, is there some effect that is unexpected, that is perhaps beneficial in some way, that makes me have these second thoughts or shifts me into some other grander perspective? That's the difference between art and porn, quite frankly. Pornography is looking to stimulate you, literally, in one direction. But art is a little bit more mercurial. Art is a little bit more complicated. Art is a little more subtle. Art gets you to think while you're feeling. And I think it's undeniable that Ovid is doing this. Ovid can be very offensive, yeah. And when you have male figures of authority, like a god, chasing down an inferior god or a human being. They do their fair share of raping of human beings as well. When they do that, human beings have only a few different calculations they can make. They can say that Ovid is making fun of the god, and he is. The god of reason, doing all those things. You could say that it's making fun of humanity, and he is. Ovid is. Because in that moment, Apollo is essentially just a horny teenager. A very human / animalistic figure. Not a god to be revered, but something much more humble and lowly. Or you can say that in that moment, humanity is superior to the god. The joke might be funny to you, it might not. That's the way humor works sometimes. But I think it's fair to look within the interior logic of the joke and see if there is something else going on there. If there is something more to be gleaned. Granted, the dignity of the choice at first. Not because it is a great work of literature and Ovid comes to us from the ancient past and we should all revere that. That's horseshit. Just out of simple decency, and because it's just easier, give something a shot at first and say, well, all right, is this valid? There's a lot of stuff that's going to come up that won't pass your sniff test and say, fine, that sucks. That's terrible. But every now and then, something might sneak in. Every now and then, something which might be offensive is offending you for a reason, is trying to provoke you, to get you to think in a different way, get you to feel something a little different, get you to feel anything as opposed to feeling nothing. Springtime for Hitler and the Producers, the original movie came out about 20 to 25 years after the fall of Nazi Germany. And in the span of a generation, sometimes people will get kind of blasé about something. And just say, yeah, okay, that's in my history books. I get that. Mel Brooks, genius. Mel Brooks was a soldier in World War II, a Jewish soldier in World War II fighting in Europe. Looking around and seeing the culture just kind of yada-yadaing. Yeah, World War II. Yeah, all right, fine. That was in the past. That was great. Yeah, I know it, and I can pass my my high school final exam on it, and that's fine. But, what's it got to do with today? Let's move forward. By pushing those buttons, he brings it back. Not in a way that is lecturing or censorious and saying, you must remember the lessons of the Holocaust and the world and this, blah, 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 blah. But he does it with humor. Trying to get you to laugh a little and admit that we are all susceptible. We are all essentially weak. And you can take that as an example of humanity being pathetic or of humanity being great. What does it mean to admit your weaknesses? Is that a sign of strength? These are These are big questions. But that's what we come to culture for. That's what literature does for us. It pokes us and prods us and, makes us a little uncomfortable. Yes, we get a lot of giggles along the way. I personally find it really hysterical when Apollo is chasing Daphne and he drops his dad's name. Don't you know who I am? My father is Zeus. Come back. I want to rape you. That's funny. I'm sorry. It is. Yes, there's no joking about rape. Rape is horrible. But in that moment, it's funny. And because the characters are so preposterous, because the god of reason is the one doing this, we recognize that it's not real. And we have to recognize that because it's all silly. It's all fake. It is all human, not written in the stars and the fates and written by the gods. It's just crap human beings make up. And that makes the human beings very humble, but also kind of like the gods. Crap that human beings make up. How different is that from crap that gods make up? It is not lost on too many that the Metamorphoses begins with the creation of the world, which in this telling for Ovid, is kind of haphazard. And, there's some nondescript god or gods involved, and who the hell really cares? Because nature is greater than the gods. Nature is the stuff of this world. Nature is the stuff of the human world. That's better than the gods, in Ovid's view.